Segues, everyone.
Seguru. Welcome to minute 75 of Awake Minute by Minute podcast. I'm hosting today. We have with us, as always, Mike and Priyank. Good to have you with us. We're really nearing the end of our journey here, and I told myself I wasn't going to say it, but here I am talking about it. We only have, 5 minutes left, more or less, 8 minutes? Or we counted it the other day, was it 7?
Yeah, something like
total,
that.
something like that. So we're nearing the end, and we are getting participation from our listeners, and we have a few minutes left. But whatever interactions we can get from our listeners or watchers, we can definitely try to incorporate that into the final minutes. So please, do continue to engage that way. But we do have an exciting minute in this minute. But from the last minute, we looked at the autobiography of a yogi being a doorway into the spiritual pathways, for thousands of people around the world. So that was exciting, seeing the multicultural reality of SRF. In this minute, we're going to look at the boundlessness of Paramahansa Yogananda's and SRF's lineage teachings, if I can say that right. So we've got plenty to go into. So first, we see Professor Wadhwa of Columbia Business School. So he's there, looking very smart. And he's somebody who we've had on the show before. And we'll link the conversation in the description to this minute. So please do jump in and have a look at that conversation. Professor Wadhwa was talking about Yogananda, saying how there was limited bounds of human lives, but at the same time, there's infinite potentialities of the souls. And afterward, we see Professor Clooney of Harvard Divinity School, who is another guest on our show. We've done a special interview and conversation with him, and we will link that in this description of this minute again. So feel free to jump back and give that a listen if you haven't already. And he's talking about the ability of humankind to overcome disease. And Yogananda, obviously, as many of the devotees know, talked about that to a good degree. But let's first go into what Professor Wadhwa said. So really, what did he say? He was talking about Yogananda encouraging people to simultaneously think about yourself as a little blip, a planet, but also that you had infinite potentialities, so that you had the eternal soul within us. So a really nice message there from him. And it sort of made me think that he's spot on in what he says here, Professor Wadhwa, because Yogananda did really give that grounding, and he actually gave the vision of what we could realize, the self-realization. But he gave a little check now and again to the ego. And a couple of things when I first joined SRF in London Centre, the chants made a really big impression on me. So wake my saint wake, and I am the bubble make me the sea, like really personal but really direct messages in the chants. And I remember just sitting there kind of in awe, like realizing the teachings coming to me through these chants. So it made me think, okay, well, I'm tiny, I'm this little bubble ready to burst at any time. So insignificant, but yet you're part of the sea. So it's such a beautiful message in a chant, in a simple chant. Priyank, what's your take?
Yeah, of course. Also, the awake, my saint awake yet awake is the melody or the theme tune that we have at the start of every episode. My saint awake yet awake. And interestingly, just 2 days ago, actually, I was quoting this. I was quoting this chant because I was trying to encourage my younger brother-in-law, whom you've met, Mike, to start meditating. And he was like, no, and he's got a very high-flying career and busy with his other social life. And I was, he's now mid-20s and he hasn't started. He's like, yeah, I'll do it later. And I was like, and I quoted parts of this wonderful chant, and I think wake yet awake, pass thy time in idle words, death will be at thy door, you may not have time anymore. And I really, really tried to hit home that message, but it wasn't. It didn't get through to him, unfortunately. Hopefully, in the near future, it would. But yeah, I really like what Wadhwa's message was.
Mike.
Interesting that you mentioned that one of the reasons why he didn't want to follow the path was that he said he had a high-flying career, but I feel like those two things aren't really mutually exclusive. They're more like complementary, right? Especially if you play the long game, right? If you want to have a inner happiness and an outer strength, then being spiritual is really an important pillar in life. And I feel like that's what Professor Wadhwa is kind of talking about, that you live this life and you're just one tiny dot on a planet. But if you live the life with purpose, then you can actually fulfill your soul's potential.
Yogananda talked about it in an early lesson to say, hey, if you're in a job that you're really not challenged by, get out of it as quickly as possible. Like vacate that job for somebody else who's coming up, and that job's going to be challenging to them. That job's going to actually allow them to grow. So you're kind of making room for other opportunities in people's lives.
Interestingly, I've done the inverse of that. I've taken this really, 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 really like simple-ish job, and and I've taken on really complex roles at the London Centre, and so I'm getting really, really stretched at London Centre. And this podcast is also part of that stretching, because we're not as listeners will no doubt know, we're not professional podcasters, nor are we scholars in Yogananda's.
How dare you?
Scholars in Yogananda's bibliography, shall we say? But it's certainly a stretch, and doing all sorts of stuff, other stuff like maintenance stuff at the centre, which I'm not really qualified for, but so I'm being really stretched through Guruji, not even mentioning all the affirmations and meditations and chanting stuff that I'm doing, but I'm stretching myself in that way and not stretching myself really at all in my employment. And I really hope my manager's not listening to this podcast, but I can probably wager a good bet that he won't be listening.
Yeah,
or colleagues,
you'll get a promotion, Priyank, to a more challenging job.
So on that though, Yogananda did say it's important to go out and earn your keep, isn't it? Like get a job that you can bring some, keep the food on the table, the roof over your head, and then dedicate yourself in passionate ways elsewhere. Didn't he? Said basically, if you're into gardening, that's a weekend thing. Like, don't make sure that you're earning enough to keep yourself in a good, comfortable living condition.
And Chris, are you putting your HR recruitment hat on now and trying to prize me away from TFL into one of the roles you're trying to fill?
I can advertise. I can advise you. Yes, I can advise you. But no, it is definitely something that seems to conflict, but yet we hear of Sri Miralini Mata saying that it's the thing that meditation was the thing that allowed her to be able to do what she did over years, and she had an insane schedule, probably more, dare I say, than your family member, Priyank. But Mike.
Yeah, I feel like that's a role model for a lot of people. For me, it was specifically Dayamata, how she kept saying that she had so much to do, and then Guruji would pile on more and more responsibilities on her. And at the end of the day, she always kind of managed somehow to get them all done. And I'm not sure if the takeaway from that is that we should work as hard as we can. I mean, we should work as hard as we can, but we should overburden ourselves with work responsibilities. But in general, like Priyan said, he volunteers a lot at the center, and then balancing this all out, I find this is something that a lot of people feel inspired by, going out to serve, even though they feel like they don't have any time, but they do it anyways. And at the end of the day, it's rewarding because you serve master. And also oftentimes you are capable of doing a lot more than you think you can.
This is a topic that I did want to touch on. This is essentially the topic of limitless possibilities, yeah. And the idea is that the flesh and bone is more limited to the boundlessness of the soul. But whenever I got into the yoga, SRF teachings, I did have that ego where I said, okay, well, I want to help others. I want to still be of service to others, to help others. And there's only so many places you can be at once unless you've mastered some cities or something. But one thing that really made an early impression on me was Yogananda did say that through your personal development in your soul, like your soul development, your self-realization, you can be a greater help to others. And that was what really struck me, was that, okay, so you go internally, change yourself, and you can change others, you change the world. And Clooney, Professor Clooney does actually go into this in some detail, so we can go to that. But that was one of the biggest impressions early on that spoke to me, that you can actually influence people through, say, if you're meditating, your aura when you walk past them, and things like this. So yeah, really inspired early on by Yogananda's teachings, and I'm glad they included this from Professor Wadhwa. But what were some of the materials that you guys, take as inspiration the most, the publicly available things, the ebooks or the talks or anything like that online, Mike?
I mean, yeah, you just threw the talks in there. They are more of a new edition, but I love the talks, especially the ones from the older monks, because I feel like those I kind of have forgotten about, and then I watch them, and then I'm like, wow, great stuff. The books, my always go-to book, Where There's Light. My other go-to book,
Yes.
Only Love.
That's the one I was expecting when you said the go-to book.
Those are, and then of course, I don't know, right now it's not, but often I have like lessons lying around here and there that I go to. And one thing that I also find amazing is the auxiliary material that the lessons come with in the app. Like, so many of them have like 5 minutes of Guruji speaking, and so powerful. So those are all, everything that I just mentioned is like more the light stuff, and that's really my go-to stuff. When I really feel motivated, I pull out God Talks to Arjuna or something like that, or the Bible commentary. But those are like my things that I do on a daily basis.
Yeah, correct. Do you have any little go-to? I'm going to say the Bhagavad Gita.
I think you read my mind. But
know you too well.
Yeah, and I've mentioned it too many times in the podcast. Yeah, but the lessons, of course, and like Mike said, some of the older talks from the Brother Ananda Moyes of this world and Brother Smaranananda sort of this world. Sometimes, like, you have a couple of videos that really hit you. Deepening, Deep Smaranananda's deepening meditation one, I just listen to regularly, get something new out of it every time, and it helps with the practices, especially in the sitting in the stillness, or the motivation to sit in the stillness after your practices. But I also really like just reviewing the review classes. And there's always every time the convocation comes around and you listen to the review class. Hong Saw I was just listening to recently, and then I just picked up two things that either I'd forgotten to do or that I never did correctly in the practice. There's always something. So I find that quite inspirational. And then what will happen is you'll have it in the background of your mind, and you'll do it for the first few weeks, and then you'll go back to your old habit, when something
Mhm.
crazy might be happening in your life, and then you'll remember, and then you go, oh gosh, and then hopefully
Yeah.
at one point it will become an ingrained habit to do it the correct way.
Yeah, good point. And I think for the listeners, the viewers, we'll include some links in the description on maybe one or two things that we find inspiring on this topic. So feel free to share yours in the comments.
That'd be good. Yeah,
we
that'd be good.
can throw around some recommendations to each other. That'd be nice. Sticking on the topic of limitless, they've done this well, as always, in this documentary. They've included some great images, some great shots, videos of, I guess, inspirational scenes, really, and examples of, I suppose, soul expression of the desire to be limitless. And one of the early shots that we see here is a man, famous scene, standing in front of a column of tanks. And you guys know a little bit about this, so maybe I'll hand over to one of you that wants to jump in.
It's the Chinese. It's in China, in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, and it was in like 1989. And I think everyone will probably recall this. It's this like really thin, innocent-looking office worker man / protester, and he's just standing in front of the tank, or an army of, there's 4 tanks actually, but even in the video that they show here is just 1 tank, and he like throws his briefcase around and like tries to say, get out of the way, I'm not moving. And the tank driver has no clue what to do, because like he's not going to run this guy over, because clearly he has a conscience. But I imagine if it was a different tank driver, they may have just ran him over. So it's such a good divine play that God made this particular tank driver have some sort of conscience, because he tried to like swerve out the way. If you watch the whole video of this, he's trying to like swerve out the way, then kind of like doesn't know what to do. But the reason it's so powerful is like, it's like this beautiful like act of defiance that really transcends like mortal concepts of like how mortal your life is and how much your life matters compared to the greater good. So I think it's probably in the history of videography and journalism, it probably ranks, I'd say, top 3, top 10
Yeah.
at the very least of like most moving videos or images recorded. And what a shot it is. And Professor Wadhwa, when this is being like said, when this is being showed, it's just such a good cinematography, because or selection of videos, because literally Professor Wadhwa says, like, you know, it would blip on the planet, but on the other hand you also had infinite potentialities. And then there's this guy with this heroic act of defiance, and it's just a wonderful bit of timing by the directors in showing that.
Yeah, he's basically throwing around a shopping bag in front of a tank.
Yeah,
like just no disregard, or complete disregard for the power of the tank. Mike?
It's a very powerful image, and imagine the courage this man must have had. He basically walked in front of a tank and just stopped. And I mean, for all he knew, the tank could have just run him over, but he stopped. And that's like Priyank said, like the voiceover is saying that the infinite potentiality of a human life, right, of a human being. And it's such a good illustration. And you have to think back at this time, 1989, 1990 was such a powerful time where a lot of the old systems broke down, and there was a lot of it was a time for renewal, and those kind of images were so powerful. I mean, I was a little kid when I saw this, but people will always remember.
I'm going to refrain from mentioning the yugas. They're in there. Scientific, the holy science book, Sri Yukteswar.
I was just across the border, about a 5-year-old child when this was happening.
Really?
Yeah.
You're there?
So I would have been in India, at that time. And
wow.
Yeah, I distinctly remember the spiritual ramifications. No, just kidding.
Yes, I felt the ripples in the ether. Yes. Okay, moving on. We have some equally moving scenes, really, with India's independence. So we see throngs of Indian people, chanting, throwing their arms in the air, celebrating. We see Indian sailors raising the Indian flag, and that replaces the British flag, which is a massive moment, August 15th, 1947. And that was, Indian Independence Day, I believe, and Gandhi is there. Who's the man that Gandhi's with? I'm hoping one of you chaps.
That's Nehru.
That's Nehru. And you're about to tell us who
Jawaharlal Nehru, yes.
Nehru is. Correct. Segue.
Oh, we're segueing. Okay. Nehru, he's a fantastic figure in Indian history, and I suppose quite important in the history of that region or that part of the world. And they call him Pandit. Pandit means a learned man, shall we say? And he was the first.
Not the football pundits that we know today.
That's where the word derives from.
Really?
So it's an Indian word, that's derived from,
Yes.
and it's been anglicized for football uses apparently.
Just like guru, yogi.
Exactly right. Yeah. So Pandit has quite a deep meaning, but not anymore apparently. But yeah, Nehru. He's one of my favorite authors, actually. In my top three, would you believe? He's written a couple of phenomenal books. One of them is called The Discovery of India, and another one which is a really, really good history of India, actually. And the reason it's so good is because he wrote a lot of it whilst he was in prison, where he didn't actually have access to research material for it. So he's writing it from his heart pretty much. And he starts it pretty much from, the dawn of civilization in that region. So, 5, 6, 7,000 years ago, and to the present day, and all the things that we know. And he writes so passionately. He's such a patriot, and he's a controversial figure because of various controversies surrounding his time and affairs, and all sorts of silly things like that. Not many have got much substance. But I find it so interesting that even in India, he's very, very much vilified in many circles because of that history. But I find it very interesting because then I say and they say things like he was a puppet of the British Empire, and I said he allowed Pakistan, East and West Pakistan to happen. He gave too much ground, and all these really unpatriotic things. And I always say, have you ever read a word of Nehru's writing? And they're like, no, why would I need to? I said, if you read glimpses of world history, for example, where this is his daughter Indira Gandhi was one of the prime ministers of India as well, and so he whilst he was in prison in India during the British time, and when India was trying to gain its independence, he was in prison, and his daughter was a young child, 15, etc. And he wanted to teach her history as he knew it, and so he'd write her letters, and each letter would have a different patch of world history that's of significance. And so these letters have been compiled into a book called Glimpses of World History. And if you read the bits on India, or the book about India, which is The Discovery of India, you could never question his love for India and his patriotism and his values, and so it's absolutely stunning. He obviously was very close with Gandhi. He was Gandhi's protege, as you would say. But he was, as an orator, I would probably rank him in the top 3 I've ever heard. And his famous speech on the Indian independence after independence was achieved as depicted in this film, in the house in the Indian Parliament, was very important, and it's very, very, the words and the way he delivered them the speech is entitled a tryst with destiny, and it starts like, long years ago we made a tryst with destiny, and the time has now come where we shall redeem that pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. And I'm saying this from memory. I'm not reading it out, and that is such a powerful speech. So I'd really encourage. I'll put a link to it, and there's a video of it as well. So it's a really beautiful and powerful speech, and is ranked in history. It's ranked very, very highly. In the same kind of file as Winston Churchill's famous speech in the Parliament near that time, where we'll fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them. It's on the same. But the Tryst with Destiny speech, I don't think I've heard any better than that. But obviously, it's quite a subjective take. But let me so everyone's probably heard the Tryst with Destiny speech, or if you haven't, when you hear it, when you hear it, you'll know when you hear it. You probably think you haven't heard it, maybe. But I'll put a link to it, and then you can hear it. But I'll instead, let me play a. I've had quite a big rant about Nehru, haven't I? But I absolutely love the guy. Let me play you. So this is a video of the first 1953, Nehru's first television recording or interview. So he came to England for some sort of coronation, and the British media interviewed him, and he's being interviewed by some high-profile journalists, some economists, and things like that. And they ask him about the very special relationship and democracy, special relationship between UK and America, and how the post Second World War, how that's changing things in world politics and democracy and around the world. And this is Nehru's response. So first the questioner speaks, the British questioner, and then Nehru will respond.
That to aim for that has a value of its own, and that it may require sometimes some compromises from our side with policies that we don't see 100% eye to eye with on the other side of the Atlantic.
But Mr. Hodgson, politicians are always compromising. They have to. But there is a tendency, if I may say so, for leading statesmen in Europe and America to look at the world from Europe and America. Well, if we look at the same world with the same principles from, let us say, Delhi or some place or Karachi, well, the world looks slightly different. Geography counts. Take the question of China. China is a distant country to most people in Europe and America. China is a country having a 2,000-mile frontier with India. Well, it's a different picture to us immediately.
Well,
Now you can hear his oratory skills. You may not even be able to tell his Indian accent. It's so subtle. Obviously, he went to England to study, but you can see, like, if you hear some politicians when they speak, their messages are timeless. So he could have been talking. This could be Narendra Modi right now, and he would have said exactly the same thing on what's happening in Russia, what's happening in China and India relationships with Russia, China, and America, and Australia, and the Quad, and all those kind of things. So Nehru is bang on the money in my humble opinion. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I like that you made the comparison with today and back then, because I feel like, especially in Western countries, we still haven't really understood that there is other places in the world and they have different perspectives than we do. And they're equally as important as ours, right? And I mean, we've come a long way, surely, but I don't think we are as far as we should be. And we still oftentimes look at other countries that are far away and go like, yeah, that's not my problem. but then we wonder when those countries look at us and when we have problems, they go like, yeah, that's also not my problem, right?
Yeah.
Was it Yogananda said to garner love for yourself, your guru, your family, your friends, for those around you, for your colleagues, for your nation, or the continent, for the world. And you can have this universal love, but it is stepping stones. It seems probably most of us truly love ourselves entirely, let alone love other people. So yeah, it's not certainly not an ideal world that we live in on that regard. But
and didn't he also say on the talk on loyalty, I think Brother Anandamoy talks about it on his talk on loyalty. He says, you know, be loyal to your family, be loyal to your local government, be loyal to your country. If you can't be loyal on those planes, those gross planes, how the hell are you going to be expect to be loyal when the most important subtle realms come to pass? I.e., when you have your spiritual experiences or the point of death. I think that's in the loyalty talk by Brother Anandamoy. Another beautiful talk.
I guess that's probably got something to do with how we view things, where we view with the lens of history. A lot of the times now that we're learning so much, every day you can be exposed to virtually all the history in the world, on the laptops, on your phones. So we kind of view the current times with the lens of the past rather than view them as they are today, or the potential that they have. So we're quite keen to punish and criticize rather than objectively look at something today. Like we look at people, we judge people for their past actions instead of how they are today and their potentials. So yeah, hard to move past that, unfortunately, for many of us. On the topic of India's independence, shall we read a beautiful poem that Paramahansa Yogananda wrote and spoke very eloquently on? Mike, do you want to kick us off? This is a poem on India and Yogananda's love for India.
Yes. At last, in India, to find itself, though mortal fires raze all her homes and golden paddy fields, yet to sleep on her ashes and dream immortality. O India, I will be there. The guns of science and matter have boomed on her shores, yet she is unconquered. Her soul is free evermore. Her soldier saints are away, their rout with realization's ray. The bandits of hate, prejudice, and patriotic selfishness, and to burn the walls of separation dark between children of the one Father.
Brian, can you continue it?
The Western brothers by matters right have conquered my land. Blow, blow aloud, her conch shells all. India now invades with love to conquer their souls. Better than heaven or Arcadia, I love thee, O my India, and thy love I shall give to every brother nation that lives. God made the earth, man made confining countries, and their fancy frozen boundaries.
But with newfound boundless love, I behold the borderland of my India, expanding into the world. Hail, mother of religion's lotus, scenic beauty and sages. Thy wide doors are open, welcoming God's true sons through all ages, where Ganges, woods, Himalayan caves, and men dream God. I am hallowed, my body touched that sod. Beautiful. So that is a glimpse into the window of the soul of Yogananda and his love for India. And moving on, can't really top that. We should have finished on that poem, to be honest.
I love the bit in man-made confining countries and their fancy frozen boundaries. I really like that. Fancy frozen boundaries. That applies to countries as well as our neighbors, doesn't it? So gross to grand to small boundaries.
Mike, jump in.
Guruji mentions that more than once, the man-made borders. I think there's a talk in Man's Eternal Quest where he talks about this, it's called Countries Beware. And I always wonder, like, imagine you don't have those borders. Are there any other kind of borders, or are we just all one? And then what does India mean then? Is India the whole world India, or is that, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we'll see how this pans out. Maybe I won't see it. Maybe it's too long of a time frame, but excited for what's to come.
Are there, if Earth is awake as we are awake, conscious as we are conscious, does it have chakras as we have chakras? In some ways, you know, energetic nodes, and then that there's maybe expressions all over the world. I don't know. I don't know. But certainly it seems like there's polar opposites in some way in the US and India, which Yogananda talked about a lot.
Yeah, Guruji was very delighted, wasn't he, when independence was achieved? Mike, I'll throw the question back at you on what you, just the last point you raised about the boundaries and borderlessness. But in the lofty planet of Hiranyaloka, do you think there's boundaries in that country?
Before you mentioned this, I wouldn't have thought so. But now I'm like, maybe there is some kind of cosmic laws that there need to be boundaries. Maybe not. I wouldn't have thought so. I would have thought that it's just one planet where everybody can go wherever they want to go.
What about the residents that have permanent residency and the ones that are coming for a passing foray?
Oh, I see.
Do you think that there's property rights there? Or something,
There definitely must be a separation in realms, because if you're a permanent resident, i.e. you've you know, as Guruji describes in the chapter of resurrection of Sri Yukteswar, he says there's two types of inhabitants, isn't there? He says if you've passed the highest stage of nirvikalpa samadhi in this life on this plane on Earth, then you can then ascend to planets such as Hiranyaloka, where you can then work out your astral ties, and then you're there for however long. You don't descend back to an earthly type realm. But then there's also those that haven't gone to that stage, and then when they go to planets like Hiranyaloka, but they are unaware of all the beauties and the freedom that a planet such as Hiranyaloka offers a soul. They just go in the dream state and then enjoy it, like kind of subconsciously, and then come back. So there must be at least, even in Hiranyaloka, there must be a slight separation of realms between the two types of inhabitants. Controversial. Obviously, I'm in no way qualified, as I'm sure everyone knows, to comment on such things.
It's fun though. It is fun. Let's ask Yogananda, see if anybody comes back.
Yeah, let's meditate on this. I can't wait to go there.
Exactly.
As a permanent inhabitant, not as a
visitor.
Not a visitor. No, I don't want a tourist visa. I want residency, permanent residency.
Yeah.
Well,
no comment.
Yeah.
I'll take whatever what I get. I think I'll be thankful. I'll be thankful. Cool. Yeah. So a beautiful poem. You could probably spend an episode just going through that and analyzing it, but we'll not, because it's mentioned in an upcoming minute. So
yes, because this is the same lines that Guruji recited, i.e., where Ganges woods, Himalayan caves, and men dream God, I am hallowed, my body touched that sod. And then Guruji took his glorious Mahasamadhi in that lovely ballroom.
Biltmore Hotel.
Biltmore Hotel, that's the one I was going to ask you. You're 2 steps ahead of me. Yeah, so we're going to discuss that in infinitely more detail in a coming episode.
Nice. And we have Professor Clooney then making an appearance, and he's talking about the limited sense of our capacity. But it does say that we have the ability to overcome disease, overcome poverty, which, I don't know, overcoming poverty kind of, to me, seems like a very touchy subject these days in some ways, because there's so many self-help books and think your way out of poverty, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, these kind of people who are supposedly massive crooks and scam artists and things. So, I have no doubt that Guruji's teachings, just to bring it back to maybe more sensible lands, you know, they're amazing. But I think some people might say, well, are people responsible for the poverty, or is it other people, and so on and so forth? But we see Clooney saying that we have the ability, then the power to begin to transform this world, which is a very powerful statement in and of itself, and a beautiful one. Priyank.
Yeah, like he says this in a very moving way, and Professor Clooney is that interview we did with him was the fantastic one. He certainly would have been my professor of choice at university if I had that opportunity.
Harvard, Divinity School.
Yeah,
so good.
But his message is delivered in two ways. His words are quite poignant. You know, we don't consider, or we don't realize how much potential we have in shaping the problems and providing the solutions that there are in the world. And you know, he mentions disease, overcoming poverty, and just as powerful as those words, which they are obviously quite moving, he says it in a very, very, the feeling you get after he said it is really beautiful one, and it really is inspiring and encouraging. That's why I was just saying, if I was in his lecture room every day, that would be or heaven forbid if he was my tutor, I would have made the most of those tutorials, I must tell you.
You'd be at the front recording every word said. Yeah,
but tutorials, yeah, especially in Harvard, I think they're just they'd be one-on-one, I imagine, especially for his classes. We used to have, like, in my lesser university, had three or four students to one, which is not as cool. And our lecturers weren't obviously nowhere near as cool. We did have one very cool Scottish, very deeply Scottish accented, but very softly spoken astrophysicist. And so he would talk about the planets and the stars and the constellations, and everyone would go to sleep because his voice was so beautiful, and quite similar to how beautiful Professor Clooney's voice is. But once, I remember in that class, so this is a huge segue, I remember, like, staying awake was nigh on impossible. That's how beautiful his voice was, and the subject matter, obviously the stars being that way. But I once remember, I thought, okay, I need to at least go to one class where I don't fall asleep. So I remember I made sure I didn't go out with my friends. I didn't have any social engagements. I said I'm going to sleep 12 hours. Yeah. So I dedicated, went to sleep at 8 o'clock. I was like, I'm going to just, force myself to. So I went to sleep, got in most of those 12 hours, had a 9 a.m. lecture with him, and I still fell asleep in his class.
Good God. Falling asleep in class. I didn't think we'd be talking about that in this episode. Use the power of your mind. Right. You obviously didn't have SRF at that point, did you?
No, I didn't. Aha. Very
There
good,
you go.
Chris. Very
Spot
good.
the problem. We have
Very
the solution.
good. Very good.
Mike, do you have students falling asleep in your class?
Say again?
Do you have students falling asleep in your class?
I've seen people falling asleep during meditation. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've done services before where some people start snoring.
Yeah. And it happens, and I've seen talks at convocation where monks addressed that, and they said, first, the good news, that's actually something that means that you are really good at relaxing your body and retrieving energy, right? Like something you're supposed to do. But then at some point you take the wrong turn, and suddenly you're in dreamland rather than in deep meditation. And so I think this is something that doesn't just happen to few devotees. It does happen. So you see it every now and then. And it's something to overcome, right? That's the thing, right? It's not a linear path. Every now and then you get an obstacle in your spiritual path, and then you need to overcome it slowly. And that's probably one of them. And I guess falling asleep in class is much less consequential than falling asleep regularly in meditation.
in the evenings, if I have had a busy day or I've had a particularly hard session in the swimming pool or gym, then in the evening sometimes I do nod off evening meditations, but happens very infrequently, thankfully. But it does happen even to me. But but allowing yourself to get into such a deep state that you'd snore, I think that's on that's on another level. I love like the feedback sandwich that monk gave in the class that you just mentioned, Michael. You're doing well, your sleep is rejuvenating and relaxing, but
It's good, good for the body, not for the soul.
Yes.
I mean, the tips that the monk gave was obviously open a window, get some oxygen in. And I don't know, like if I meditate on the floor, I'm much less likely to get tired during meditation.
And during marching on the spot, you can. He said, when you tense your whole body, then you can march on the spot. Like if you don't have time for energization, there's a short version, which is that, and then they said, whilst marching, you can march to the tune of "I'm awake and ready. I'm awake and ready. I'm awake and ready," and that should make that affirmation alone, as well as the action of marching, should allow you to be awake and ready for the meditation.
Amazing. I'll do it next time. One thing I also really like is doing energization one each, because it's like super fast. You finish it like in 5 minutes.
Oh, so you're saying cheating? So not doing the 3 to 5.
It's all coming out now. Sleeping, cheating.
So a monk suggested that to me. It's like better to do one each than to not do them. And I was like, all right.
Hopefully there's
ever since.
Hopefully
there's
on occasion I've done that. Yeah.
Hopefully there's no non-SRF lesson students listening going, what are you guys talking about?
Stick to Guruji's teachings.
Yeah, that's true.
Good segue here. Energization exercises. One of the ways that you're going to have to talk about fighting off disease. What were the other ways of fighting off disease? You can name a few. Fighting off disease. Affirmations, yeah.
Of course. Healthy living.
Yep. Living by like food and things, you mean? Or sleeping properly.
All of that good stuff.
Yeah, everything, all of the above.
Not sleeping during meditations probably helps.
Good sleep, not during meditation.
One thing that doesn't always come up, but I feel like it's important, is like introspection and unweeding all the yuck from your mind, getting rid of all of it.
So Yogananda talked about disease really in 3 ways: the mental, physical, and the soul. And he said his guru, Sri Yukteswar, would say wisdom is one of the best remedies for diseases. And there's lots of material on Yogananda talking about disease and how to rid yourself or simply not get disease in the first place. There's lessons, there's talks, there's great ebooks. We can list a few again in the descriptions. Scientific Healing Affirmations. There's a book called Healing by God's Unlimited Power, Harmonizing Physical, Mental, and Spiritual Methods of Healing. In the lessons, he talks really about some specifics that we can't really go into, but healing the eyes, your stomach, the digestive tract. He gives you those instructions of how to actually go about doing that. I'm a hypocrite here because I wear glasses, and he talks about if you basically don't want, you could heal your eyes so that you can, no need for glasses, right? I need to put that to the test. But a few other things that he says, really: sun, 10 minutes of sun per day.
Sun baths,
sun baths, sun baths, exactly.
Unless you live in the UK, then.
The pain.
Priyank, what are you doing for your sun baths? You're falling behind on this.
Try and have 1 round of golf a week.
Well, one thing that you're doing is fasting, yeah? So you fast
Yeah, that's true.
regularly.
That's
You're
true.
very
That's
good.
true.
You do
That's
fast,
true.
and that's
Once a week
natural.
and twice a month. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fighting
that is
disease, yeah.
actually one of the most important things, the fasting, one day per week. I think Guruji mentioned that in so many, like, I think he mentioned that even in the autobiography of a yogi, where he meets an older devotee, and he says, by fasting regularly, he has maintained health into high age.
Mm.
So
Mm.
very powerful.
Yeah, and lots of studies been done on that more recently. So he is speaking well ahead of his time, Guruji, as usual.
Yeah.
The other thing which was really cool was joy. He mentioned joy, you know, the power of the smile, that genuine smile, can allow the power of God to enter the body and the mind. And it helps distribute cosmic current, prana, into every body cell. And that's really cool. Because it's not something I think is so, it's not promoted, is it, much in the world? But it really does, like when you're joyful, when you smile, you can feel uplifted. The body cells are tingling. So yeah, it's something you could experience just by sitting in the place that you're sitting on. I
totally agree. I think the joy actually enforces, or it helps your healing powers, and the opposite is when you're sad, then it hinders it. So very important to always stay in a happy, peaceful state of mind for health.
Yeah. Do you have anything here, Mike, that you would go to when it comes to like spiritual methods, feeling, you know, any material with Yogananda's teachings, any talks, anything like that?
One thing that came up in the last convocation that I liked was that the monk said, whenever you have like a body part that's injured or hurting, that life energy is intelligent life energy. So if you just tend the area around there, that means life energy is being directed to that area, and it will automatically start healing. I found that pretty cool, and I used that recently. Found that very helpful.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, you never know the percentages or something, but I did it. It's healed. I was happy about it.
Yeah, yeah, but it's such a powerful statement by Professor Clooney here, that we're far too limited by the sense of our capacity as human beings to overcome disease. You know, we do rely heavily on the Western world. You know, the medicine, pharmaceuticals, especially in the US, things like this. But really nice that they included this inspirational message from Professor Clooney, and of course, this is something Yogananda talked about a lot. So it's great to see in there. So really, chaps, we've covered topics of the minute that we wanted to cover. Limitless possibilities, and then the overcoming disease, India's independence. Is there anything else from the minute that you would like to cover, or that we didn't cover?
Nope. I'm happy. Happy as Larry.
Yeah. Good.
Larry was a happy chap in England.
Who's Larry?
Exactly.
It's Cockney. Cockney. Happy as Larry. Rhyming slang.
Did not have that in Austria. Yeah.
Cockney rhymes? Nope.
That's great. It's a great minute. Great content. We'll roll on to the next one. So Jai Guru, thank you so much for joining, and until next time.
Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.